But the reason we talk about silver and gold is not so we can go, "Whoa, it's mine, it's mine, it's all mine." It's not a greed thing. It's about doing what's responsible. And when the politicians were tethered to gold and silver, they couldn't go out on these ridiculous spending sprees.
Skyrocketing silver prices, skyrocketing gold prices.
Yeah.
Is that a possibility? Is it a reality? Are the conditions in place right now that we could see that happen in the near future? Today, we're fortunate to be joined by Mr. John Little. He's the publisher of the Pickaxe. He's also written for other high-level publications in the past. John, welcome to Ron's Basement.
It's my honor to be right in your basement. I feel like I'm there, and we're just going to riff back and forth. And in order to serve your viewers better, you have a very, very, I would say, lively activist group of fans. So it's my honor to be here today, Ron. Thank you.
On behalf of all them, I always like to say it's YouTube, not RonTube. So on behalf of everyone joining us today, thank you, John, because I know you're going to bring a wealth of knowledge. And I did some research on your work prior to our conversation this morning.
Thank you.
Very impressive. I'll just throw out a big open-ended question. What do you see when you look out at the silver market in particular? What conditions do you see right now that are of interest to you?
Okay, let's go and break that down.
Sure.
We're in an environment where we know that let's just make it easy. We could go back to when the Federal Reserve started in 1913, or we could go back to when Nixon closed the gold window in 71. I like to start sometimes, to keep it simple, around the great financial collapse of 2008 and the beginning of this new crazy term called quantitative easing, which was, our own government basically issuing mortgage-backed securities and T-bonds or printing money, because the idea is you're supposed to make a product and have the market buy this product. So when they started buying it themselves, it would be like, Ron, you have kids, I know I do, and for our school's fundraiser, it really wouldn't do the school any good if they were holding a bake sale and then just buying it themselves. The idea would be to have the public buy in. So there really hasn't been a market for a lot of these financial instruments because the world's been watching the toxic orbit of the US dollar, specifically the East, and they really don't want to have anything to do with it at all, given the fact that it's tethered to $32 trillion of debt, not counting unfunded liabilities. So now it becomes an issue of, lately there's been whisperings that they're becoming hawkish, but we all know that it's just a temporary so-called fight of inflation, which since COVID, we've seen the expansion of the money supply by over 40%. So unless your income's gone up 40%, and none of us have, in fact, wages have been stuck in terms of purchasing power like they were maybe in the 70s or 80s or even worse. So unless you've gone up by that same 40%, we're just getting hammered. And that's why silver and gold are really the only escape route. Silver, we can talk about as being sort of been hammered down. And this has been happening for centuries. It started in the 12th century. Whenever usually a king or an emperor or anyone wants to go to war, usually what would happen is the king would make a deal with some private businessmen. Was the case with the Bank of England being founded. He surrounded himself with 40 businessmen so England could attack France. Bank of England was born, but they vault the silver and gold and then issue paper certificates representing the paper or the vaulted gold and silver. And then they pretty much infect the population with these worthless notes. So it's no different than what we're seeing today. And, silver's merely, or let's just say the way it's traded now on the open market through paper transactions, a derivative is a financial instrument of an underlying asset. So that's why we keep saying, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. So if we're just stacking this silver that's grossly undervalued, and the formula I use is I see the market crashing to about 29,500 on the Dow. And then the Dow to gold ratio usually returns to about 10 or 11 to 1, which puts gold at around 2,950. And then you can run numbers on that 2950 number for gold. And the historical mean is around 50. But even if you go to around 65, just pat it in favor of the manipulators, you're still looking at $42 to $43 silver by, late 2024, which is a doubling. That's a pretty damn big move. Especially
that doesn't quite get us to 100, but we'd be very happy to see $43.
Well, you can't get to 100 till you get to 40. So
right.
I get you on that. The one reason it's tough to get to 100 is, besides the manipulation, and this is the newest, or not even newest, this has been going on for a while, but I've been going down this rabbit hole of as doing some work with some as a ghostwriter for some pretty big names, that silver just has so many uses in solar panels, electric vehicles, batteries, the military, night vision goggles, shells, missiles, that anyone that's an industrialist and is watching their factory inputs, all raw materials, all labor, all maintenance, all insurance, all your business overhead, they just aren't going to allow silver to get to 100 quite yet until there's a reset. And then when there's a reset, it's pretty easy to do the math. Then it really explodes, as you just take debt divided by ounces above ground, and you can go to ChatGPT or Bard, Google's GPT, and just say how much gold is above ground. It'll tell you, and then say what is world total debt. It'll say around 300 trillion. If you do the math there, the number's well over 20,000 an ounce. And then back into the ratios for the gold to silver ratio. So that's the fundamental value of gold and silver. It's just based on how much is available. And until
how much is available, and then I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, how much money is out there. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to use a real simple example, because I think what we're at the bottom line is we're talking about dilution of the US dollar. So it'd be like if you and I were drinkers, which I'm not, but if we were, and I came over to your house and I had a bottle of bourbon, right, a fifth of bourbon, Jack Daniel's whiskey, and I said, yeah, you know what, John, here's a bottle of whiskey, and you said, well, I'm going to make even more whiskey for us, Ron, and you got another bottle and filled it 40% with water, and you mixed the two together, and you said, here you go. Look at this. Now we have 40% more. Sure, it still tastes like bourbon, smells like bourbon, but it's just not as valuable or powerful.
Right.
And would you say maybe one of the underlying conditions that will affect in the long term precious metals? And I think it's important to remember, if you envision on one side all these dollars and the 40% or 50% of new dollars that were printed during the health crisis that we had during 2020, like that can be that amount can be, as we know, increased to infinity. And then on the other side, you have a pile of all the silver and gold in the world. That, sure, there's new mining production every year, but that remains constant, right? Like the money, the paper, the electronic, the derivatives, that can go on forever, but the gold and silver remains constant.
Well, you said it better than I could have. Let's stick with your drinking metaphor. And
okay,
intermittently I do drink, but not. If my wife is listening, I don't drink. So
right.
I really don't that much. But let's just say you have a six pack of beer sitting on that ping pong table. And above that 6-pack of beer, let's just say, to keep the math simple, there are $12 chasing the 6-pack. So each beer is $2. But now if they infuse $24 above that same 6-pack of beer, now each beer is $4. So you just doubled the price. take 3 away, which happened with supply chains, right? Now each
Mhm.
beer is $8.
Yeah.
So that, you said it best though, when you talked about what's really happening. It's actually both. During Rome's fall, they had a 95% pure coin. Then they introduced base metals, and it's usually copper or zinc. Then the purity of the coin by the end of the empire was down to maybe 3 to 5%, I believe. So you can either flood the market with worthless paper notes or debase the currency. It has the same net effect. And then, Gresham's law is basically that people will seek out the good money and flush out the bad money. So, and then you brought up that last good point about stockpiles. The reason why gold is considered kind of the perfect money is because all the gold that's ever been mined over time, and I don't have that number at the top of my head, but I can't remember. It's around 7.8 billion tons or something.
It'll all fit underneath the base of the Eiffel Tower. I read that a couple
Right.
weeks ago.
There's all these,
Right.
the World
Swimming
Gold
pools.
Council has a graph showing it. But the
Mhm.
good thing about gold, as what we call hardness of money, not like if you bite on it, it's hard, meaning hard to replicate or is that it's what you call the stock to flow ratio. Very little is mined each year, and it's getting much worse because of the cost of mining itself, labor and diesel to mine it, and the ore quality is horrible now. Like, to take the silver analogy, in the 40s or 30s in Idaho, a 4-man crew with a pickaxe and a shovel out of a ton could get about 43 ounces of silver. Now that same ratio is they're getting about less than an ounce. So the ore quality is bad, the cost of mining is higher, and the fact that you're with gold, only maybe less than 0.5% of new supplies coming online relative to existing stockpiles. So it becomes the best stock to flow ratio, making it the hardest to, you can't print gold, you can't print
Right.
silver. So it's that, you can't print oil. Oil's a good, but you can't sit there and carry barrels of oil in
Right.
your car. Whereas,
Mhm.
so silver is a store of all the labor and energy that went into that mining effort. It's a store of energy value.
Yeah, I want to interject one, because I like to point out, right? Like, here's a 1 ounce silver round. Now, I don't know where the silver came from, right? It could have come from the 1930s in Idaho, like you said, 2 guys with a pickaxe and getting, 43, was it ounces you said, or grams out of each ton?
43 ounces per ton of byproduct or
Right.
dirt and other metals and rocks. Yeah.
Or it could have come from 500 years ago in Peru. Or it could have come from 2 years ago in Alaska. Who knows? But at the end of the day, it is a lot of effort and energy went into creating that. And I think we forget about that oftentimes as people that maybe hold on to metals, that it is a store of energy. Is that an accurate
That's
thing?
a perfect analogy. I wrote an article recently called The Law of Intricacy, Utility, and Scarcity. And whether you're making wine, olive oil, I lived in the desert Southwest where Navajo rugs are extremely valuable. And you look at all the steps there. They raise the sheep, they have to shear the sheep, then they have to spin the wool into yarn and then dye each one a different color, build a loom, intricately weave the rug. And all those steps represent the end product. So if they go to market, they can trade effectively with someone likewise who's taken all the time to irrigate the land, take care of the soil, yield a crop, and then they meet in the marketplace, the rancher, the farmer, the rug weaver, and everything. They're recognizing and respecting each other's efforts, energy, time, etc. That's why silver and gold work, whereas a worthless piece of paper, you'd get kicked out of the marketplace in Greece and Rome. And even prior to the Industrial Revolution, fiat currency is a fairly new thing. Government, there's no reason to ever have the government involved in where money comes from, because we already have money in the form of gold and silver. And those are really the only two. I mean, there's things been used over time, like clay pots, seashells, other
Tulips.
yeah, and so tulips, right,
Right.
other crypto, whatever, but
Right.
none of them really are even recognized by our Constitution or Roman law. So yeah, so
It's,
go ahead.
well, it's interesting, and maybe this is a bad analogy, but I've used it several times over the last few months. Like, I like the concept of John Exter's pyramid, that silver and gold are the base of everything. And sure, over thousands of years, many times, like you said, seashells, all different types of schemes and ideas and concepts were created that always ended in ruin. And I like to use the analogy, as I sit here in my basement, that and I don't, but if I did have like a pile of silver and gold, like, it's still there, it's over there, it's like waiting in the corner. My analogy is like, it's like the Navy, like an elite group of the Navy SEALs, right? That only comes out for, like, they're there, they're in their barracks, they're valuable, they're waiting. And that silver and gold, history has proven us over time, always reclaim or are re-recognized. They never completely lose it, but they're always re-recognized as like the purest form of value. Does that make sense?
Well, that's a great analogy, because you got to look at, there's been all these transformations from, let's just start with agrarian society, then gets into, you can think of all the areas, the Greco-Roman, then yielded to sort of the era of the Crusades. Then we had Portugal is the reserve currency. They fell to Spain. Spain falls to the Dutch guilder. Dutch guilder falls to the British pound. British pound falls to the US dollar. And now we're seeing the emergence of BRICS. Each time there's a reset, gold and silver step up to do the accounting for the miserable failures of governments, bankers, and all the derivatives that Exter's pyramid. And what is that number now? In quadrillions, right?
Quadrillions, yeah.
Right. So, and if you take
interesting you bring up BRICS, because I've heard several commentators, analysts that I really respect, basically point out the fact, there's all this speculation about a new BRICS reserve currency, and August 22nd, this big day that we're going to maybe hear something. But everybody that I respect kind of comes back to saying that, oh, it could be, this new reserve currency, it could be backed by oil or wheat or some combination. But they always come back to the fact that most likely it's going to be gold, because like you said earlier, oil is consumed, not perishable, but consumed. Wheat is consumed and perishable. And gold is always I guess, and I'm not an expert on this Gresham's law, but is that Gresham's law, that it always kind of goes back to?
Yeah, it comes back to, actually, in what you're talking about now with this Johannesburg meeting, it's going to be the BRICS summit. There's a Russian economist named Sergei Glasiev, who an advisor to many presidents, even and officials. He's not an oligarch. He's not a member of the military. He's not a politician, but he's an economist. And he was the first person that the United States sanctioned back with the Ukraine civil war in 2014. And he engineered what's called the gold for oil, where he fixed, a gram of gold to a barrel of oil. And the reason he did that is because none of these nations outside of the US dollar, which again, I said has a toxic orbit, none of these nations trust each other's currency, but they do have, they've been stung a lot more than the United States has had some constitutional stability for the last 200 plus years, and they haven't. So they're not going to trust the rupee, the ruble, the yuan, Iraq's currency, but they do trust gold. So, and now let's just take the numbers. We're talking 75% of the globe, all of Africa, all of Latin America, most of the Arab states, Russia, China, and India, versus what? The US. And look at Europe right now. I posted a video yesterday of France, and it makes Middle Eastern countries look, it's very similar in terms of, just go to my Twitter handle and you'll see the video. But the BRICS will win this war. But anytime there's a struggle, I think Ray Dalio put out a series called Big Swings, where he talks about these transitions from one global reserve currency to the next. They're always going to be characterized by a lot of civil unrest, a lot of war. And it's in those black swan events that you really see the spikes in silver and gold. Recently, we've seen silver and gold get hammered, but that happens all the time until the next collapse of, Silicon Valley Bank. And then what followed that, Ron? There's a couple in New York. England had to step in and save the pension fund within a day, right? So how many more black swans? You can only, it's like the little Dutch boy. He can only put 10 fingers, but the cracks are emerging. And then it comes to a point where you cannot get your hands on this silver. And we have great research on even the World Silver Survey by the Silver Institute, a very conservative organization, and people have been critical of them because they underreport. But they're even showing, you can just chat GPT and go, how much is the silver deficit from the last two World Silver surveys? And the amount, and we're talking millions of tons of silver. Go ahead.
I think last year it was 243 million ounces.
Right. That's 1 year. Now put that against the transition to net zero, that the plan to get rid of the awful internal combustion engine. So you have the batteries, you have, all of this laptop that we're on right now. All and most of it's undisclosed because, and we'll get to that in our third interview, the military industrial complex does not, due to national security reasons, which they can hide that excuse for anything, just call it national security. But the amount of silver that's used by our military and some of the research that Illuminated Ape of Silver Degen Club's doing is just a massive amount. And they can't let that word get out because it would make the US look like our military's at risk. So that's when the apes will have their glorious moment, is when we see that, what would a world without silver look like? And that's,
so I want to interject two things.
Please.
You talked about the Silver Institute pointing out that we have a deficit between mining, silver mining and recycling. About 1 billion ounces are provided to the market each year. About 1.25 billion ounces are demanded each year. That's 25% more silver. That's significant. I mean, that we're not talking about, there was a little imbalance last year. And what I read is that, if I remember this correctly, the deficits from the last 2 years pretty much sucked up all of any surpluses that were created during the previous 11 years. So it's real. And then on BRICS, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I think it's also important to remember with these BRICS, two things with these BRICS countries. The BRICS organization is continuing to expand. We hear of more and more. I mean, eventually we're going to run out of countries in the world, but it seems like everybody is wanting to join the BRICS. That makes it even more challenging for them to back this reserve. And this is my theory, makes it more challenging for them to potentially back the reserve currency with anything other than gold, because the more groups you have in there. And the other thing, and then I promise I'll zip my lips, John, is that it's also so important to remember that most of these BRICS countries like China, Russia, India, just those big three alone, and I guess South Africa, well, Saudi, or the list goes on. They have a deeply rooted cultural and monetary history with gold and silver for that matter. Like they
Right.
look at it way different. Like I like to say, like in China, I read an article about gold in China and India as well, right? Like they're the inverse of the United States. Like we're the definitely the minority, right? Here in the United States that are enthusiasts and love silver and gold and recognize and know the value of silver and gold. It's like the exact opposite over there. Like everybody knows, and the people that don't are the small minority. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. I would say it is 180 degrees. In our mainstream narrative, I wrote an article, you can look it up. I think it was published by Goldseek and Money Metals, but I said, why do the gold bashers have a stage? And in US, there's these clowns like Harry Dent, another guy named Dave Ramsey, who was recently sued by a lot of people on, they just run their mouths and they come out about 5 times a year and say gold is going to zero. How can gold go to zero when the cost of production, Newmont and Barrick just came out with their production costs, it's close to $1,800 an ounce. So that puts a floor under the price of gold. And for silver, the cost of production is now approaching 22, which is about the spot price. So you've put a floor under it. Now get back to your comment about India, Africa, Russia, China. When you have those massive populations that have a cultural legacy to where if you were to put in American or Western terms, their Christmas or their holidays, or more importantly, their weddings are all tied to buying silver and gold for the new couple. They don't buy a bunch of plastic crap they do what's smart for the couple. The last thing you want in America, they spend $20,000 on a catered event and the next day the couple has nothing. In India,
oh no, the couple has some debt possibly.
Yeah, there you go. And in India, in these other areas, the idea is let's help this young couple out, and the women, will wear the jewelry. The governments encourage. Now, there's problems with these respective governments. I mean, China is no saint, nor is Russia, nor everyone is, filled with and chock full of problems. Some are authoritarian, but I would say we're getting towards authoritarian. We've had censorship. We've had, police brutality. Our government, the U.S. military has been involved in 57 undeclared wars since World War II. So we're no saints either. But getting back to your point, it is the opposite, because here no one talks about gold, and there people are encouraged to talk about gold, which goes to your point, which is as they bring more people under their net, there'll be that much more distrust towards each other's fiat currency, thus more reliance on gold. And really, and when you brought up Saudi Arabia, that was the death blow to the United States, because after Nixon closed the gold window in 71, Kissinger made that sweet deal with Saudi Arabia saying that all oil transactions had to be denominated in US dollars. And as of last month, Saudi Arabia is basically saying they've already done transactions in other currencies. So now all those dollars are going to come rushing back to our shore. They're going to be dropped like a hot potato. And that's the second round where we approach hyperinflation, because you think our printing was bad. Wait till you see when those people start unloading their treasury investments and buying gold. That's why you've seen record gold buying in the last 5 months by these other countries.
Yeah, I like to say, you think that it's a small percentage of Americans who understand the value of silver and gold. It's an even smaller percentage of Americans who understand the petrodollar and the implications that can cause, or the unwinding of the petrodollar. When I'm at the neighborhood pool, I joke around and say, if there's a neighbor who comes up and starts talking to me and I want to get out of the conversation, I'll start talking about silver and gold, and they always kind of wander away, right? Because most people,
it's amazing to me. And my wife goes, before we go out, she goes, "You promise you're not going to talk about silver and gold?"
Right.
And I go, absolutely. And then
well, I'll tell you what, John, if that doesn't work and you want to get rid of somebody, start talking about the petrodollar. That really spins them. They're gone.
Okay. Good advice, because I can't stop talking about it. It doesn't mean that that we perseverate or we're obsessed, it means that we're mad and angry. And
Yeah.
it's just, I mean, and I never get involved in guns or abortion or any of those cultural wars, but there are some people that are passionate about anything from LGBTQ, WXYZ, any single issue where you'll get someone passionate about their convictions. But the reason we talk about silver and gold is not so we can go, whoa, it's mine, it's all mine. It's not a greed thing. It's about doing what's responsible. And when the politicians were tethered to gold and silver, they couldn't go out on these ridiculous spending sprees. And if you look at their new bill called the, I think, Omnibus Spending Spree, it's got gender training for the military. It's got these Hillary Clinton museum projects. It's got all, and both on the left wing and the right wing, the members of Congress are buying and selling energy and war stocks after intelligence briefings. So that's insider trading, you know, just like what Martha Stewart went to jail for a decade ago. You know, we used to have a democracy, then it morphed into a sort of a plutocracy, which means ruled by a few elites. And now we just have a kleptocracy, which is they are stealing from us out in the open. So
that's what I like to say. To me, what it feels like is the pillaging of the country
right
at this point.
So silver and gold are your only, you got to look at them
anchor
as an anchor to fight back with. I'm not going to go and shoot someone at a country club, obviously, because it's a
right.
You know, what I'm trying to say is that it's your only way to fight back that's within the law, you know.
Well, we covered a lot today, and we have a lot more to cover. I want to mention to the viewers, we're going to do, we'll have another video coming out where we're going to cover an interesting subject, which is some kind of scams that are going on within the precious metal sector. And then equally as important, we're going to have another segment where we talk about a movement that could result in another squeeze in the silver market. Is it hashtag drain the mint? Is that correct, John?
Yes, sir, it is. And it's the brainchild of the Silver Degen Club on Reddit, and our Illuminated Ape and Dumb Money Media and the Pickaxe. And you actually, you've been wonderful. And, you know, we're seeing a media blackout from the big dogs. I won't name names, but we all know who they are. Yeah, we're going to do 2 more. The chemistry here, Ron, is fantastic because you think you're better at rephrasing things. I could use you a lot in a favorable way. And we're going to direct more, everybody subscribe, you know, and we'll put links in the description field. But I'm a big fan of your broadcasts. You just have a really good way of breaking this stuff down because it's very cerebral and it gets very depressing. So you do it in a way that's so positive, and you have a fan base that they're just fun to watch your comments. I'm honored to be involved, seriously.
Well, thanks, John. We'll look forward to seeing you soon. And thanks to everybody for watching today, and come back to Ron's Basement soon, and take care, John.
Thank you.